European Council and Commission statements, conclusions of the Special European Council meeting of the 6th of March, and Council and Commission statements, preparation of the European Council of 20th and 21st of March, as well as European Council and Commission statements, European security architecture, urgent decisive steps and unwavering support for Ukraine. President of the European Council is on his way. He was delayed by fog in Brussels, so as soon as he lands, he will come straight to the chamber, so we can go to the Council. Minister for the European Union, Adam Szłapka, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam President Metsola, Madam President for the Leyen, honourable members. Allow me to focus on the preparation of the meeting of the European Council on 20 March, which will, as always, start with an exchange with the President of the European Parliament. The Spring European Council meeting is traditionally focused on economic issues. However, in view of the rapidly evolving international context, leaders will also follow up on the special meeting of 6th of March. We are all aware of what is at stake, and the leaders will build on the important progress made at their meeting last week. Allow me to add my voice here in stressing that only a comprehensive, just and lasting peace for Ukraine can put an end to the Russian war of aggression. A peace that is negotiated by Ukraine and its legitimate authorities led by President Volodymyr Zelensky. A peace that involves Europeans whose security it will affect without a doubt. A peace based on strong security guarantees. The European Council is also expected to revert to the situation in the Middle East, which has evolved substantially since the leaders last addressed the topic in December. Let me now turn to competitiveness, which is a centerpiece of the agenda of the next European Council. 2024 was a year of assessment and reflection with the Letta and Draghi reports, the strategic agenda for the next 5 years. 2025 is the year for action and delivery. 3 priority areas have been identified for the leaders' debate on competitiveness: simplification, energy, and the saving and investment union. For the EU to remain competitive, we need to cut red tape and simplify EU rules for businesses, especially SMEs, reducing administrative burdens and creating a simple and clear legislatory framework remain a matter for urgency. Europeans also require access to clean, secure and affordable energy. And we have to take steps to address the saving and investments mismatch in the EU in order to better meet Europe's investment needs, in particular those of young and innovative companies. This will also be important to ensure private financing to develop our defence industry for years ahead. Leaders will also address the topics of the single market, industrial policy and skills, paying special attention to those sectors that are heavily impacted by the sustained rise in energy prices. Finally, under this point, the European Council will also turn to its customary point on the European semester. For a more long-term perspective, leaders will have a first exchange of views on the next multi-annual financial framework and the new own resources, following the publication of the Commission communication of 11 February and ahead proposal expected in summer 2025. Migration also remains high on the European Council agenda. Leaders will take stock of progress made in the implementation of previous conclusions and ensure a steady pace of work on returns. Finally, Other foreign policy issues will be addressed, notably multilateralism and oceans, which are expected to be on the table during the working lunch leaders will have with UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres on Thursday. Depending on developments, member states may also want to address issues in specific third countries or regions. A Euro summit is also scheduled to take place in the margins of the European Council and will include the usual discussion on the economic situation with the President of the Eurogroup and the European Central Bank. To conclude, we expect a substantial European Council meeting following up on the decision taken at last week's Special European Council and advancing on essential work to ensure we are well prepared to meet the many challenges ahead. We are at the crucial juncture. We must rise to the occasion. Thank you very much for the attention.
Thank you very much, Minister Schwabka. Now I give the floor to the President of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen.
Thank you very much, Madam President Di Roberta, Minister, honourable members. It's now 70 years ago that Alcide de Gasperi said, "We don't just need peace among us, but to build a common defence, this is not to threaten or conquer, but to deter any attack from the outside driven by hatred against a united Europe. This is the task of our generation." End of quote. 70 years have gone by, but our generation is faced with the very same task, because peace in our union can no longer be taken for granted. We are facing a crisis of European security, but we know that it is in crises that Europe has always been built. So this is a moment for peace through strength. This is the moment for a common defence effort. And at the European Council, I saw a level of consensus on European defence which is not just unprecedented, but was completely unthinkable only a few weeks ago. There is a new understanding that we must think differently and act accordingly. We have started to mobilize Europe's massive resources, and in the coming weeks and months, more courage will be necessary, and other difficult choices await us. Honourable members, the European security order is being shaken, and so many of our illusions are being shattered. After the end of the Cold War, some believed that Russia could be integrated in Europe's economic and security architecture. Others hoped that we could rely indefinitely on America's full protection. And so we lowered our guard. We cut our defense spending from routinely averaging more than 3.5% to less than half of that. We thought we were enjoying a peace dividend, but in reality, we were just running a security deficit. The time of illusions is over now. Europe is called to take greater charge of its own defense, not in some distant future, but already today, not with incremental steps, but with the courage that the situation requires. We need a surge in European defense, and we need it now. We need it first and foremost because of the situation in Ukraine. There is the urgent need to fill the gaps in Ukraine's military supplies and to provide Ukraine with solid security guarantees. But this moment of reckoning isn't only about Ukraine. It is about all of Europe and our entire continent's security. Putin has proven time and again that he is a hostile neighbor. He cannot be trusted. He can only be deterred. And we know that Russia's military complex is outproducing ours. If we look at the military expenditure in real terms, the Kremlin is spending more than all of Europe combined. Europe's production is still on a lower order of magnitude. And beyond traditional capabilities, the range of threats that we face is getting broader by the day. I know that the European Parliament argued for years that Europe needs to do more, and you were absolutely right. And this is more dangerous today, the era we live in, so Europe really needs to step up. And this is the goal of the plan that I presented to leaders last week. Its logic is very simple. We want to pull every single financial lever we have to strengthen and fast-track our defense production. With the ReArm Europe plan, we can mobilize up to 800 billion euros. So, honourable members, let me focus on some of the main features of this plan. First, there is the so-called national escape clause. And let me start why it is crucial to mobilize national budgets. Just if we look today, we spend just short of 2% on average of our GDP on defense. Every analysis today agrees that we need to move north of 3%. Now look at the entire European budget, it only reaches 1% of the GDP. So it's obvious that the bulk of new investments can only come from member states. And this is why we're activating the national escape clause, foreseen by our new fiscal rules. This is a new tool that was created just last year. And we propose to trigger it in a controlled, time-bound, and coordinated way for all member states. This can transform our defense budgets quickly and effectively. Member states could mobilize up to 650 billion euros over the next 4 years, adding round about 1.5% of GDP to their defense budgets over 4 years. This is massive. And yet, the European Council has tasked us to explore further measures to facilitate significant defense spending at national level while ensuring debt sustainability. The second point. The European Council has agreed on our proposal for a new financial instrument. We call it SAFE, Security Action for Europe. We offer member states up to 150 billion euros in loans to invest following a few basic principles. They could focus on a few selected strategic capability domains. You're familiar with them. It's advanced air defense, drones, missiles and ammunition, strategic enablers, military mobility, cyber, artificial intelligence, just to name a few, so that we maximize the impact of our investments. These loans should finance purchases from European producers to help boost our own defense industry. The contracts should be multi-annual to give the industry the predictability they need. And finally, there should be a focus on joint procurement because we've seen how powerful this can be. Just think of the Czech initiative or the Danish initiative to provide weapons and ammunition for Ukraine. One nation that takes the lead, others join in to place larger orders. Industry then can scale up and prices went down. It was both very quick and very effective. And this is exactly what we need right now, scale and speed. And this is why we have chosen the emergency procedure under Article 122, which is designed precisely for times when, and I quote, severe difficulties arise in the supply of certain products, end of quote. In other words, the 122 allows us to raise money, to lend it to member states for them to invest in defense, and this is the only possibility for emergency financial assistance, and that is what we need now. We will keep the Parliament constantly updated on progress. And this leads me to my third point, the cohesion funds. This is a possibility that we are offering to Member States. Member States will have the possibility to redirect some of their uncommitted funds to defense-related projects. This could be infrastructure, it could be research and development. This would be voluntary for those who want to go the extra mile. It will be up to Parliament and Council to decide on this additional option. And for the same reason, ReArm Europe also includes measures to mobilize private investment with the European Investment Bank and our upcoming Savings and Investment Union. Honourable members, all of this will also have positive spillovers for our economy and our competitiveness. It will include new factories and production lines that will be necessary, creating good jobs right here in Europe. The investment boost will be felt well beyond the defence sector. We know these spillover effects to both sides, be it from steel to space, large transport companies, or the innovative AI startups. Together we have the size to deter any hostile country. We have the economic power. And now finally, we also have the political will. We all wish we could live in more peaceful times, without any question. But I'm confident if we unleash our industrial power, we can restore deterrence against those who seek to harm us. It is a time to build a European Defence Union that ensures peace on our continent through unity and through strength. This is Europe's moment, and Europe will rise to it. Thank you very much, and long live Europe.
Thank you very much. So we'll go to the speakers of the political groups, starting with the President of the EPP Group, Manfred Weber.
Madam President of the European Parliament, European Commission, Council representatives, dear colleagues, we as EPP, we know what we owe the Americans as Supreme Commander Eisenhower and American soldiers brought freedom and democracy back to Europe. Reagan's call to the Soviet Union, tear down this wall in 1987, brought freedom and democracy also to Central and Eastern Europe. On the other hand, what happened in the White House 2 weeks ago was simply a scandal. To say Ukraine is responsible for the war is simply a lie. And even with our long history with our US friends in mind, we must call a lie a lie. No one can twist the truth. Putin doesn't want to end the war, he wants to end Ukraine, and as Europeans, we will never allow this. After the speech of Vice President Vance in Munich and what happened with Zelensky in the Oval Office, one reality is clear, dear friends, we are alone. The world is in turmoil. Europe has to wake up. We have to become responsible for ourselves. Our security is not in the hand of Washington or Moscow, it must be in our hands. Since 1952, Madam President, Commission President referred to this, more than 70 years ago, we had the first idea of building up a defense union. I have to say, we wasted a lot of time in the last 70 years for discussing it, endlessly. Last Thursday, putting 800 billion euros on the table to build up a European defense was an important step showing that Europe finally takes its defense into its own hands. Money is in this regard a precondition, but is only the starting point of doing so. We need to go further. The first point, we would save a lot of taxpayers' money if we act together. We have 17 tank models in the European Union, the Americans only have one. We need standardization, we need an obligatory common procurement, and we need to build up a true European market for defense goods with also further mergers in the industry side. This is not yet fully foreseen in the plan of Thursday. Secondly, we need joint European projects like a missile or drones defense system, especially in the east side of Europe. A cyber defense brigade, where everybody understands that cyber is not anymore a national issue. A satellite surveillance system, where we are not anymore depending on US data, and every European citizen would immediately understand it's better to do these kind of investments together. I would love to see then parts of the troops with the European flags on their uniform. This is not yet foreseen in the plans of last Thursday. And Europe has to answer the offer of France to define the French nuclear shield as a kind of a European shield. This is not yet part of the plan of last Thursday. And imagine for a second Trump finally would invite Europe to go to the negotiation table, to Saudi Arabia. Who would represent then Europe? Commission President, question mark, Council President, High Representative, Merz, Macron, who would speak on behalf of Europe? And on which base he or she could then speak and act? Unanimity as a precondition for having a voice, then in Saudi Arabia, dear colleagues, that shows clearly we are ridiculous. We are not up to the task in this moment of time to give a proper answer. Kissinger said years ago, decades ago, whom shall I call when I want to speak with Europe? And let's be honest, we didn't give a proper answer on this until now. Europe stands at a self-defining moment. I think we should once in the future elect the President of the European Union directly by the citizens of Europe. Is this naive? Is this a dream? I think without dreamer, as Adenauer, de Gasperi, Schuman, Václav Havel and Wałęsa, no one of us would sit today in this chamber of the European Parliament. The truth is that the plan of 1952 was more ambitious on a European spirit than what is on the table today. We need dreams that create hope and the determination to implement them. This method brought 70 years of peace and then finally the reunification of the European Union 35 years ago. And finally, dear colleagues, because of the European Defence Union, the purpose is to defend our democracy. Even more democratic legitimacy of the process is needed. The Parliament must be fully involved. Bypassing the Parliament with Article 122 is a mistake. Europe's democracy stands on two pillars. It's the citizens and it's the member states. We need both for our security. Last Thursday was a great starting point, and I truly congratulate Ursula von der Leyen and Antonio Costa for the strong message, the will to invest into our defence and to our strengths. But this can only be a starting point. The main task of our generation is to create a true European Defence Union. The European People's Party is ready to do so.
Thank you very much. And now I give the floor to the President of the S&D Group, Iracha García Pérez.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, President. Today, once again, we can look back and recognise that the founders of Europe were right. Europe is built on the basis of crises. From the wreckage of the Second World War, going through the pandemic, the fall of the Berlin Wall, all of these crises have made us stronger, more united and more aware of the role we have to play in the world. Donald Trump's rise to power and the way that he is forging links with the war criminal Vladimir Putin means that we need to take steps to ensure our security. And this crisis offers us an opportunity to make a step forward in building a true defence union. The ReArm plan for 800 million euros is a step in the right direction, but we should not deceive ourselves. It's just the first step. Suspending the fiscal rules to free up 150 billion doesn't mean that we'll manage to achieve that, because not all of the countries have the same resources. And the money backed up by common debt should be the trigger for a new instrument the successor of the next generation EU, we can't allow national solutions to fragment our defence efforts. We need more common money, more solidarity and more strategic vision. And at the same time, we need to ensure that these investments in defence are not done to the detriment of social spending and the welfare states that we have, which is the essential part of the European model. Because if we undermine that model, we will be falling into the trap of the far right and undermining our democracy.
Of a genuine common defence and our support for Ukraine are two sides of the same coin. For 3 years now, a democratic nation has been suffering the brutal aggression of Vladimir Putin, an aggression driven by imperialist paranoia, justified with lies, aimed at stopping Ukraine's integration into our democratic and prosperous Europe. We cannot and will not allow Ukraine's sacrifice to be in vain, a sacrifice that has already cost thousands of lives, with hundreds of thousands injured and millions displaced. The European people have a long memory. Neither Trump or Putin will make us forget the bombing of civilians, the massacres in Bucha, Mariupol and Zaporizhia, or the bravery of families who have sent their loved ones to the front lines only to lose everything. But let me be clear, we cannot resign ourselves to helping Ukraine only to resist. We must help Ukraine to win this war. To achieve this, we need bold and decisive action. Mrs. von der Leyen, we are waiting for your legal proposal to confiscate the 200 billion euros in frozen Russian assets to rebuild and arm Ukraine. We cannot continue to tie Ukraine's hand while Russia bombs its people. Colleagues, if we let Kyiv fall to Putin, autocrats will have won a decisive battle against democracy, a battle that will define the 21st century. As Churchill said to Chamberlain, you were given to choice between war and dishonor. You chose dishonor, and you will have a war. Let us not repeat that mistake. Let us stand with Ukraine. Let us defend our values, and let us ensure that democracy prevails. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I give the floor to the President of the PFE Group, Jordan Bardella.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, President. Mrs. von der Leyen, you have been caught up by history and the reality on the ground that you denied for so long. You felt that it was right to delegate our security to the US, industry to China, and energy policy to Russia. What we have learned is a lesson that applies to humanity as a whole. If a nation does not have autonomy, control over its weapons and industry, it is condemned. This is a tough world, dangerous world. We have seen the conflict in Ukraine, war continuing, a war of attrition, no clear hope of victory. We need a clear priority, peace and independence. The first top priority is to work through diplomacy. A top summit of Western allies. Giorgia Meloni, the Italian Prime Minister, can lead the way, define the goals for sovereignty in Ukraine. What demands should we make? What security guarantees can we offer to this allied country so it is no longer facing and fearing Russian aggression? Now, in the longer term, we need to ensure autonomy for European nations. We need to ensure that we alone can shape our interests and define the conditions governing our security. We need free, independent diplomacy. France can become the driving force in the continent and a clear interlocutor in this new world. France has a world-renowned army, an exceptional industrial base, a permanent seat at the UN Security Council. It has a nuclear deterrent, and of course, it understands the importance of this issue. Mrs. von der Leyen, your political choices, unfortunately, have always failed. You opted for degrowth through the Green Deal. You moved away from nuclear, and what we're seeing are too much red tape, buying in US goods rather than a European preference when it comes to defence procurement. We need a real sea change. That is the only way that Europe will remain a key player in history, act as a real deterrent, and prevent new empires being built. Thank you.
The floor to the President of the European Council, Nicola. Mr. Procaccini.
Grazie.
Onorevole Procaccini, can I give the floor to the President of the European Council first, because he has just arrived? Nicola, Onorevole Procaccini, posso dare la parola?
May I give the floor to the President of the Council, who has just arrived? If you could just wait a moment. Thank you very much.
Costa. President Costa, go ahead.
Thank you. Madam President of the European Commission, Minister Schwabka, honourable members, the European Union is living a defining moment. The sense of urgency is upon us. Geopolitical tensions have risen over the last weeks. Multilateralism is under enormous pressure, and so is the rules-based international order. Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine entered its third year, and the threat is representing it as a wider implications for Europe and international security. This is exactly why last week the European Council took fast and ambitious decisions on defence and Ukraine. We are putting our money where our mouth is. We are delivering on what we promised. 3 years ago, precisely, in Versailles, we decided to boost Europe's defence, to build the Europe of defence. 3 years ago, we laid the foundation of what we decided last week. Over the last 3 years, Member States increased their defence spending by 30%. Over the last 3 years, on average, among the 23 European Union Member States that are in NATO, we reach the NATO target for 2024 of 2% of GDP. Now, we are going much further. In 1 month, working hand in hand with the European Commission, we have kick-started the Europe of Defence. On the 3rd of February, in the informal leaders' meeting, with the special participation of the British Prime Minister and the Secretary-General of NATO, we opened the way for decisions. Last week, the Commission anticipated some of its proposals on defence financing, which were the basis for European Council decisions. In this special European Council, we decided to invest in the priority areas already defined by the European Defence Agency, reflecting the lessons learned from the war in Ukraine and in full coherence with the NATO. Air and missile defence, artillery systems, missiles and ammunition, drones and anti-drone systems, strategic enablers, military mobility, artificial intelligence, cyber and electronic warfare.
We have also decided to mobilise more public and private funds for our defence need. In addition to the loan instrument proposed by the Commission, leaders were clear that we need flexibility with the Stability and Growth Pact, and in the use of the European funds will also be important to provide more public money for the defence sector where Member States decide to do so. The European Investment Bank initiative to broaden its mandate for more loans to the defence sector will improve access to private financing. Finally, we decided to spend better and more efficiently together, with joint procurement, ensuring standardisation and simplifying permitting and reporting requirements. Our focus is clear. Next week, the Commission and the High Representative will present the White Paper on Defence, and the European Council will continue to take work forward to build our deterrence, to strengthen the security of our continent. Competitiveness and defence must go hand in hand to boost Europe's industrial and technological competitiveness, to create jobs, reinforcing economic convergence and the resilience of our values chains networks. It is the right way to make the European Union stronger. It is the right way to protect our citizens and our social model. Mesdames et Messieurs, les efforts que nous
Ladies and gentlemen, the efforts that we are making to spend more in favour of European defence will benefit Ukraine too. The security of Ukraine and that of Europe cannot be dissociated. The main guarantee of security that we can provide is to strengthen the capability that Ukraine has to defend itself and to build up a credible defence which is robust in Europe. Last week, we also tasked the Council to work quickly on new initiatives intended to respond to the urgent needs faced by Ukraine in terms of military and defence. At the same time, we are prepared to support Ukraine when it decides to start negotiations in order to achieve a lasting, just peace. We are encouraging partners to support Ukraine. On Friday, I organised a video conference with the President of the European Commission and the High Representative with NATO partners such as the United States, Canada, Turkey, Norway and Iceland. The Extraordinary Council meeting had just ended and our friends reacted very positively when it came to our decisions and how quickly we had taken them. Our common interest and commitment strengthened our cooperation once again. We have to keep up the pace. At the European Council meeting, which will take place next week, we will continue our discussions and we will take further decisions on competitiveness and on strategic European autonomy. We are all very much aware of the need to catch up when it comes to innovation, productivity and investment. Re-establishing European competitiveness should be the first amongst our priorities. This is an essential issue and will be one which will be addressed at the next European Council meeting. And I will come back to speak to you to tell you what was discussed.
Senhores deputados, hoje não é apenas o terceiro aniversário da Declaração de Versailles.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, 3 years since the Versailles Declaration, and and 50 years since the first Council meeting in '75. So since I assumed this particular position, we've seen numerous developments. A Europe of defense and prosperity is going to be part of this mandate, integral. These are two linked issues, and it's absolutely clear that strengthening the role of Europe in the world is a strategic choice that has to be made, because in the present context, we have to really strengthen those ties that we have with third countries, those alliances, trade agreements, anything that's associated with development worldwide as well. But at the same time, we see ourselves having to confront serious global challenges. We are a dependable partner, and many countries throughout the world want to work with us together at all levels. 100 days later, we find ourselves in a point where we have to cooperate effectively on all fronts. Thank you very much, Roberta, and thank all of you. Thank you, Ursula, as well. The European institutions, the member states, have to be more united than ever for a strong European Union. In order to move forward, we have to trust ourselves, have confidence. We need more unity as well under these particular geopolitical circumstances. We are seeing situations developing very quickly, but we will be stronger, we will be more robust for peace, prosperity, welfare in Ukraine and in Europe. Thank you very much.
President Costa. So now I give the floor to the co-president of the ECR group, Nicola Procaccini. Thank you again.
Thank you, President. Now I deserve an extra minute because of the discomfort you caused me.
I understand.
So thank you, President. The European Council represents a step in the journey back to reality, which we welcome. Yes, we would have liked greater clarity on the sources of financing for the plan, on long-term planning, and on its integration within the overall framework of the Atlantic Alliance. Considering ReArm EU a retaliation against Trump and the USA is a tragic mistake, just as it would be to see it as a concession to the Trump administration. Investing in defense and security is an act of dignity for our nations and a mark of respect for our international allies. It was Obama and Biden before Trump who asked Europe not to rely solely on the sacrifices of the American working class. And what was Europe's response? The Green Deal, a massively expensive welfare system, tariffs on American cars, and some moral lessons towards those who ensured our security with their own money and even their own blood. Macron is right when he says that imagining the European Union as the only herbivorous power in a world of carnivores is pure utopia. The problem is that we don't stop breeding the carnivores. Look at the European imports of liquefied natural gas from Russia. Do you know how much France alone has increased its LNG purchases in the past year? By 81%. Money that Putin uses for the missiles with which he bombs Ukraine daily. When Trump says that the European Union has given more money to Putin than to Zelensky, he is telling the truth. I hope this hypocrisy ends once and for all. The Italian Prime Minister is right. Let's not call it ReArm EU, but Defend EU, because the peace and freedom we enjoy must be defended. And defense is not only about weapons, but also about strategic infrastructure, raw materials, communication systems, and technological innovations. Meloni is right again, and not only her. when she states that the European defence detached from American allies and NATO is unthinkable. Politicians and legislatures come and go, but the West remains and must remain for a long time. We are bound by a common past and a common destiny. As the Latins say, simul stabunt, simul cadent.
Thank you very much, Mr. Procaccini. And now the President of the ReNew Europe Group, Valérie Hayer.
Madame la Présidente.
President, President, Minister, ladies and gentlemen, who could have thought a few weeks ago that the United States would support the United Nations with China and North Korea in a resolution in the United Nations against Ukraine? Who could have thought that it would have attempted to take over Greenland? And what we're seeing on the other side of the Atlantic is not disengagement, it's a complete change in the way things are done. The facts are what they are, though. So, since 20 years, Russia and China have been increasing their defence spending, and the White House is no longer our ally. The world is changing, and we need to learn the lessons of that. The first thing is that we need to be able to stand up for ourselves. So, Madam President, yes, let's produce in Europe, let's buy in Europe. I say to you 100 times yes to this money and to the new ways of financing that. It's important that our money helps our economies. We can't have strategic autonomy and sovereignty without focusing our spending in Europe. But we also need to work quickly on this, on the Eurobonds put forward by the Parliament and some of the EU's governments. And we also need to think about how we're going to mobilise our efforts in Europe. The strategic issues are very extensive and we need proper coordination. Our armies, the million soldiers in Europe, need to be able to work together. And it's also important that we improve the European benefits from the nuclear shield without calling into question sovereignty on that issue. It's these conditions which will allow us to preserve peace. It's also important that we continue to support Ukraine because their security is our security. The decision taken by Donald Trump to stop military deliveries and intelligence sharing means that we have to take our destiny in hand again. Obviously, we've made mistakes in the past, but we need to support Ukraine now and provide security guarantees for Ukraine and for ourselves. And that will involve sending troops to support peace once we have an agreement. We have to deter the Russian threat once and for all. The lessons to be learned here is that our democratic model is under threat through Russian interference in the East and by Donald Trump in the West, and also by reactionary forces that we have here. And Mr. Procaccini, when you're talking about greater sovereignty or greater support rather for Ukraine, I don't agree with what you've said. You have to remember this is Kremlin propaganda and Donald Trump's propaganda. We are supporting Ukraine. We have stood side by side with them since the beginning, and we will continue to do so until we get peace. And peace does not mean capitulating. Madam President, the shield needs to be there, and we're waiting to see the proposal that you have. But let's already start by using the laws which we have. What about the DSA? The fundamental principles of law is that if you break those, then there should be penalties, and it's your responsibility to ensure that the laws are respected. Our aim now, ladies and gentlemen, is peace, international order, and promoting democracy. We have the assets to be a military and democratic power, and we need to step up to that role.
Thank you, Madam President. First of all, Mr. Costa, I would like to thank you for the Council conclusions, and certainly on Ukraine, where you opted for a conclusion by 26 member states and not 27. And I think that was a very good decision to do, and not every time try to weaken our conclusions in order to get all 27 on board. However, this also means that the Council should act on this asset of Putin within the Council. Doing conclusions with only 26 is a first step. Triggering Article 7 is really, really time to act on it. Secondly, Madam President, I want to thank you for your ReArm proposal, and the Greens are fully on board and supporting you for a truly European defence and security union. However, in your plan we do have some questions and concerns. First of all, triggering an escape clause. To be very honest, if you are triggering escape clause in your fiscal rules continuously, maybe at a certain moment you need to wonder whether maybe the fiscal rules are not fit for purpose and you need a proper review instead of every time triggering an escape rule. Secondly, and here I have to agree with Mr. Weber, the European approach is not strong enough in your approach. The 800 billion, only the 150 billion are European, the rest is national, without any clear indication there will be a European approach, and even with the 150, only by doing it through a joint procurement, I'm not sure this will really have a proper European approach. We don't need more tanks on the Greek-Turkish border. That brings me to the third point. Defence and security is much broader than arms and ammunition. This is about infrastructure. European infrastructure needs to improve also to transport all the materials throughout Europe. This is about rail infrastructure as well. This is about cybersecurity. But this is also about energy independence. And Mr. Procaccini, you said it already. Looking at how much money we as Europe are spending on fossil dependency, 400 billion euros each year, and we moved it from Russia to the United States. It's not helping anything. So the green transition is in the same agenda as the security agenda and should not be treated separately. And that's why we are concerned that investments in green and social transition are being at the cost of investments in security. And therefore we need to increase both, and we need to increase spending on both. That brings me to the last point. The situation in Ukraine is very dire and very sincere. And we cannot act, and we cannot lack on action and have complacency. The next Council needs to act faster. We need to stand by Ukraine. We need peace in Europe. We need peace in Ukraine. We need peace on our own terms. Thank you very much.
Vielen Dank. Für die Fraktion Die Linke spricht.
Well, thank you very much. Now our colleague from the left, Mr. Shirdevan. Thank you.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you, President. Donald Trump is willing to cast Ukraine to the lions in Russia, destroying international law, the international order. It is no longer about the strength of law, but the law of the strong. And so it is even more clear, Mrs. von der Leyen, that you are paying for the fact that you scandalously ignored diplomacy and only focused on a military solution to the war in Ukraine. No single diplomatic initiative was supported by the Commission, Turkey's efforts, Brazil's, China's, Israel's, the African countries, not even the Pope's efforts. This is a huge political failure on the part of European politicians. In your speech and in Mr. Costa's speech, we heard nothing about the Commission or Council taking up diplomatic initiatives that would be in the interests of Ukraine. The transatlantic partnership no longer exists. Trump is threatening the world and the EU with a destructive trade war. He is cozying up to dictators like Putin, and European politicians are being led by the nose through the arena of the White House. We still hear time and again only military solutions. All of a sudden, the debt brake no longer applies, and we have 800 billion euro. That money, I can assure you, will go towards US weapons. If we want to ensure strategic autonomy, we need responsible politics. We need to do away with the debt brake for once and for all. We need huge investment in industry and digital infrastructure. We need energy security, social security, research and development. We need now to attract the brightest minds to Europe. The European digital market can no longer remain under the thumb of Elon Musk and his tech bros from the US. Honourable members, NATO is done with now. The EU needs its own security architecture, and the focus, the priority must be given to diplomacy over military solutions. That does not mean that we should not provide for requisite defence capabilities, but we cannot drive the profits of major arms manufacturers and large-scale investors. No one should be turning a profit when it comes to war. We need to nationalise the European armaments industry, and we need to strengthen international organisations such as the EU, defend international law. We didn't hear anything from you, Mrs von der Leyen, or you, Mr Costa, on self-determination, sovereignty. That's important for Ukraine. And what about a criticism of Russia, but also Turkey and Israel? International law applies to friends, not just our enemies. If we want credibility, we cannot apply double standards. Strategic autonomy also means a better relationship with China. Mrs von der Leyen, the EU Commission must put an end to its childlike approach to strategic planning. Thank you.
Für die ESN-Fraktion spricht jetzt die Kollegin Boven-Dijk.
Tudják, mit nevezett Arthur Koestler zárt rendszernek? Egy olyan gondolkodási sém...
You know what Arthur Koestler called a closed system? A pattern of thinking that excludes reality and logical coherence from reasoning. It is emotionally based and ignores common sense and reality. When you push for continued unbroken support for Ukraine, regardless of changing circumstances, you are thinking in this closed system. By denying reality, you have made Europe appear to be opting out of the peace settlement and, by extension, the redistribution of spheres of interest. It is time to face reality. For years, Hungary has been put on the shame bench for problems with rule of law and lack of transparency. Why does this not bother you in the case of Ukraine? We cannot talk about democracy. It has an illegitimate president. Violent coercion and violations of human rights is a daily occurrence. The trampling of minority rights is slowly turning into genocide. Yes, I do not hear any concerns about rule of law in that country. Instead of voting for more astronomical sums of money for the war, we need to investigate, in the name of transparency, how much of the billions of euros that have been sent to Ukraine so far have ended up in the pockets of oligarchs. It must be clarified whether some of the weapons that have been sent there have really ended up where it's gone. For example, terrorist organizations such as Hamas or ISIS, is that a possibility too? Step out of your closed minds and get a grip on reality before you fantasize about Ukraine's membership of the EU and NATO, because you're playing with a fatal weakening of Europe and the prospect of a third world war.
Und ich werde jetzt mit der Redezeit relativ streng sein müssen, weil wir im Anschluss einen fixen Termin haben.
I'll be quite strict on speaking time and I'm now going to close the Catch the Eye procedure. Mr. Halizia.
Szanowni Państwo, to bardzo ważne dni, bardzo ważny moment.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're living through important times. It's a crucial time, and our citizens are looking to us. We need to stop talking and arguing. It's time to take steps. The security that we need requires decisive action now. A patriot today shouldn't be discussing and talking. He or she should be implementing projects allowing us to build up a defence. You can't be a patriot if you slow down that process. Nor is it time to get lost in procedural discussions. I call on the European Parliament to take decisions quickly now to implement decisions and to give a strong mandate to the Commission and our governments and our leaders. Yes, we need to implement these projects as quickly as possible, and taking decisions quickly is essential. Our citizens are looking to us not just to mobilise billions for industry and for defence, but also to strengthen the border infrastructures that we have. We've slipped on that over the years. what we're seeing now is just a drop in the ocean concerning our needs. We need a proper shield to the east. This is not a Polish project. This is a project which will serve the whole of Europe, from Finland to Romania, for the whole of our eastern flank. We need to reinforce that, and we need projects for dual-use goods and other essential aspects for security. These need to be supported by European funds. The citizens are looking to us for common sense and quick decisions. So once again, less talking, less bureaucracy, fewer resolutions and more action. We need to take steps to mobilise these billions that the European Commission is putting forward for the security of our citizens.
Our next speaker is colleague Maniatis. Colleagues, President, so revisiting the external policy of the United States with the United States provides challenges. We have to support Ukraine. That is the best investment we can make for our own defense as well. The strategic autonomy of the Union, particularly in security and defense, is absolutely necessary. It is imperative. ReArm EU, although it sounds ambitious, doesn't make the difference. And the 800 billion are loans which in no case ought to be there at the expense of the welfare state and the cohesion funds as well. If the exit clause is not implemented with strict rules in order for us to be able to meet the strategic needs of the Union, we may create more problems than those problems which we're trying to solve. Europe has to support, it has to defend its borders, its citizens, has to defend them from all threats from third countries, whether those countries be countries in the Baltic region or Eastern Europe, or countries in the Eastern Mediterranean like Greece and Cyprus. Thank you very much.
Dankeschön. Nächster Redner ist der Kollege Deutsch.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is colleague Deutsch.
Európában az emberek békét akarnak.
In Europe, we want peace. In the US, the aim is to achieve peace. The patriotic US government is in favor of peace, and yet European leaders are looking to drag out this war. That is a crime and a mistake. Ukraine's Brussels strategies thus far have failed. Supporting warfare has led to billions being paid out, losses all round. Those that support war are on the wrong side of history. Trump has clearly stated that he wants to end the war and move towards peace. The US no longer wish to engage in proxy warfare. And yet now European leaders are trying to force that war mindset on us. They are looking to fund war in Ukraine, step into the breach as the US leaves, even working against the US goals. Brussels leaders are going even further, talking about accelerating the accession of Ukraine to the EU, and that would destroy the European economy. We need to put an end to this war, and that is only possible through negotiation.
Thank you. Our next speaker is colleague Jaki.
Thank you so much, President, ministers. There is no doubt who is the aggressor and who is victim. The aggressor is Russia, and the victim is Ukraine. There is no doubt that no reset with Russia have never succeeded and never will. The only thing that can stop Russia is credible force. And the general direction of strengthening European arms capabilities is good. However, you will not escape from the fundamental questions. You are talking about the security of Europe. Great. I would like to ask you how the security of Europe is served by cancelling election in Romania and not allowing the candidate with 50% of support to run. How does allowing Tusk to destroy opposition, take away the all public money from the opposition party and imprison MEPs serve Europe's security? How do your migration policy and the migration pact served European security? And the key question is about, do you want Europe to defend itself from external threats or for Europeans to kill each other? Instead of integrating Europe in the face of threats, as usual, you choose your particular interest. Ukraine. If the Strait of Ukraine grew from the numbers of your empty words, the Ukrainian army now would be preparing to parade in Moscow. Do you want help? You have 300 billion euros of frozen Russian assets. Give them to Ukraine. That will be enough for 5 years of war. But you won't do it. You keep it because you want them to use to negotiate further resets with Russia. That is why you keep attacking America, provoking it to leave Europe. And you yourselves do not have those military capabilities. Your behavior will cause the EU countries that border with Russia to be great danger. President Zelensky found about this after the summit in London. He will not provide the army weapons with your slogans. And that's why we need to change it.
Dankeschön. Nächster Redner ist der Kollege Kelleher.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is colleague Kelleher.
The EU is a beacon of hope for millions of people across the globe. It's why Ukrainians broke down in tears when they crossed into our union after Putin's immoral invasion of their country. And it's why migrants do everything to get here to live and raise their families. And that's why Putin and other tin-pot dictators despise us. We give people hope while they only give people fear. It's why it must be defended. I quote, "If something is worth building, it is worth defending." These are the words of Sean Lamass, former Irish Taoiseach and leader who submitted Ireland's application to join the European Economic Community. My country is militarily neutral. We won't join a military alliance. But that doesn't mean we don't take sides. We are on the side of freedom, democracy, multilateralism and a global order based on international law. Ireland is lucky. We are an island in the Atlantic surrounded by non-threatening nations. But I know my friends and colleagues along the eastern border of our union live in fear of the return of Russian imperialism. I see the worry in their eyes. I hear the pain in my friends' voices when they speak about living under Russian occupation before independence. That's why I will not stand in the way in terms of defending your homelands and your homes. And Europe must collectively defend itself. Our unity is our strength. This is a big change, and I know I will be castigated by the extremists at home on the left and on the right, but it is morally the right thing to do. Ireland will not join NATO, but I firmly believe we must ensure our fellow member states have the resources needed to defend their sovereignty and their values. We must have defence bonds. We must make it easier for the states to strengthen their militaries by relaxing Stability and Growth Pact rules. We must all work together on sharing intelligence and ensuring interoperability and defence systems and energy security. Ireland must use every possibility under our constitution to support our European friends, humanitarian aid, training, non-lethal weapons, support for demining initiatives, financial support and increasing our own military defence capabilities. I will say it again, if it is worth building, it is worth defending. There has never been a greater force for peace, prosperity and progress than the European Union, and we must defend it.
Thank you, dear colleague Keller. There is a blue card. Colleague Keller, there is a blue card by colleague Grasulis. Do you want to accept that? Grasulis? On the right side of the panel.
Are we in English or French?
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Gerbiamas pranešėjau. Dear member, you have said a lot of words, but there are still too few actions to support Ukraine from the ruling majorities, from the EU in general. Why Ukraine has not been accepted to the European Union yet? Is that the fault of the United States or Russia? Why have you not heard the plea of Zelensky over these years? Could you please listen to him and accept Ukraine into the EU?
30 seconds for response.
Well, we have been very supportive of Ukraine's application to join the European Union. And that has happened over many, many years. In fact, in recent times, we have supported them financially, they've been supported militarily, and of course, you are promoting the propaganda from Russia and elsewhere, saying quite clearly that the European Union doesn't support. But if you look at it, and if you listen to President Zelensky himself, he says quite clearly and categorically that the European Union has been a friend to Ukraine and has supported them both financially, militarily, and in humanitarian assistance as well. So I reject your points out of hand, as they don't stack up with the evidence.
Vielen Dank. Es wird Sie nicht überraschen, dass wir auch bei den Blue Cards ziemlich...
So also we're going to be quite strict with regard to the EU blue cards. We don't know how things will go, of course, but it goes without saying that I'm going to really limit the time and be quite restrictive. Thank you. Our next speaker is colleague Staikis.
Wonderful, Madam President. Europe is a giant in chains, wealthy, powerful, yet paralyzed. And objective reality and data show that there is no need to despair. Quite an opposite. We have given Ukraine 134 billion euros. Sounds like a lot, but it's just 0.2% of our GDP. If the US step back, we can raise that to 0.4% without difficulty. The Baltics, Finland, and Denmark already contributed nearly 1%, a small price for lasting security. And our economies have only become stronger as a result. And we can make Russia pay. Let's seize 200 billion of Russia frozen assets and direct them to Ukraine. Madam President, the European Commission must make a decision on this right now. Dear colleagues, the numbers don't lie. We are 450 million Europeans. Russia has just 140 million people. Our economy is 12 times larger. We have everything we need to defend ourselves and others. The only step left, removing the chains we have placed on ourselves.
Vielen Dank. Als nächstes spricht der Kollege.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is colleague Zajantkowska. Excuse me, colleague Botenga is our next speaker. Please excuse me, our colleague Botenga.
Thank you, President. 800 billion euro, not to pay wages or pensions, not to treat all Europeans on waiting lists, healthcare waiting lists. No, that 800 billion is for weapons. We are now spending 2 to 3 times more on warfare than Russia. We are spending and have 4 times more military vessels than Russia, 3 times more tanks and artillery, and 3 times more fighter jets. Russia is not able to occupy even a quarter of Ukraine. So it would struggle to compete with the might of Brussels. And now we're saying we need more soldiers, more weapons. Mrs. von der Leyen, who wants to send their children to fight on the front? Put an end to this war talk. We need to invest more in diplomacy. We need more coordination, not more funding for weapons. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is colleague Zajantkowska. Thank you.
Szanowni Państwo, nowy militarny eurodług będzie narzędziem.
Ladies and gentlemen, the new euro debt will be a way of putting pressure on member states and their sovereignty. It's exactly the same as the reconstruction plan. If you don't meet the milestones and that doesn't please the European Commission, well, you'll see what happens. It's political blackmail, essentially. We're going to have to pay the price, which will be the percentage of these debts and loans. So all you seem to be able to do is build up debt. The planet's burning and you want to build more weapons. Seeing how you respect democracy, we need peace, not war, I'm not sure that I'm willing to go along with this. What we need is a plan focused on peace, not a major European army. I'm not going to give a single euro for your project.
Spricht der Kollege Papadakis.
Our next speaker is colleague Papadakis. Neither useless nor weak as its apologists claim, those of the European Union, to prove and to say that to escalate its war preparations is all part of what has to be done against Russia, China, amid the growing contradictions with the U.S. In camera and on the camera as well, cynicism about sharing Ukraine's loot, rare earths and energy transport routes pulverize the pretenses of both sides. An increase of 800 billion with loans of hundreds of billions, 800 billion, an announcement for extra digital taxes shows us that we are going to pay with blood, with refugees, with dangerous involvement. The only real escape clause for the people is to struggle for no involvement so that they themselves do not pay for the slaughterhouses of the imperialists. Autonomy for the people is not that of the EU from its competitors. Oxygen is what we need, and what we need to do is work together and concertedly for it. Thank you. Speaker is colleague Mureşan.
The European Council, dear colleagues. Unfortunately, our long-standing partner, the United States of America, is disengaging from Europe. It is disengaging in terms of security and defense. It is disengaging in terms of trade and economy, and it is disengaging in terms of defending democracy, rule of law, and human rights. We do not want this to happen. We regret this. We will never turn our backs on the United States of America, but we need to recognize the new reality where the United States administration has other priorities. When Russia is challenging us from the east and the current Trump administration is questioning the defense of Europe from the west, the conclusion for us, Europe, is simple. We have to defend ourselves. What matters most now is what we are going to do ourselves at European level, and I believe we have to do two things. Firstly, continuing to support Ukraine. Stopping military support to Ukraine is not a way to peace, it is a way to helping Russia. We should not do that. Keeping Ukraine safe means keeping Europe safe, firstly. Secondly, we have to invest in defense, and I believe the 150 billion euros common European project put forward by the European Commission is correct, but we have to do it right. When we spend European money, we have to support European projects. What projects we're going to finance matters a lot. We should use this European European fund to do projects which none of the member states can do alone, so that the citizens of Europe see the added value of Europe. We should do the common European air defense shield and other European projects, invest in European research, produce more, order more, in bigger quantities, in smaller unit price, same equipment for the militaries of all EU member states. Europe can do a lot to make sure that our militaries are well equipped with this European project. And of course, if European money is spent, the European Parliament has to be involved. Let me say in the end that investing in our defense means keeping Europe safe. If we are weak, we are a target. If we are strong, we are safe. Thank you very much.
Vielen Dank, sehr geehrter Herr Kollege Gratsoulis.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gratsoulis, I mentioned earlier on that we're only allowing one blue card per member. I'm sorry for the restriction. Our next speaker is colleague Mixer.
President, colleagues, a wise person once said that tactics is the art of using personnel and arms to win battles, whereas strategy is the art of using battles to win wars. Much has been said about how we need to rebuild European defense and security in a medium to long term, and I agree with most of it. Meanwhile, the decisive battle for Europe's future is playing out on the front lines in Ukraine. And needless to say, following the very dramatic reversal of course by our American allies, the outlook has changed to worse. So we need to step out and we need to fill the gap left by Americans, and we need to do it now. It's not a matter of months or years. It's a matter of hours, days, maximum weeks. If we fail in Ukraine, if Ukraine falls, then we will not merely be back to square one. We will be in much, much darker place, starting to rebuild Europe's security from shambles. We must not let this happen.
Schön, die Kollegin Brilka.
Our next speaker is colleague Brilka.
Pani Przewodnicząca, Panie Przewodniczący, Unia Europejska próbuje zaklinać...
Ladies and gentlemen, the European Union is trying to spell reality with more laws and regulations, while in fact it is in the midst of a gigantic leadership crisis, an economic crisis and security crisis. These are the fruits of the European Union. The President of the European Commission is using the war in Ukraine and the crisis in relations with the US administration as a pretext to accelerate the construction of a European superstate. Such a state means one thing: the failure of Europe. The real intention of the European Commission is not to provide aid to war-torn Ukraine or to solve any European problem. More problems are just a pretext for the appropriation of more competences of the Union. We have already had 1. A proposal to amend the European Union treaties, a reform of the decision-making process, including the abolition of the veto, and after the last European Council, we got a decision on yet another euro debt, that is, the transfer of powers to the European Commission to borrow money on the capital markets in order for them to blackmail nation states with the funds thus gained, as happened actually with the national recovery plans. We do not agree with the transfer of these competences to the Union and the curtailment of the sovereignty of nation states. Now the Union supposedly wants to deal with the development of the arms industry in Europe. Understand this as, at last, the best help that this Commission and this House can give Europe is to refrain from doing anything at all. Thank you.
Keeping my finger crossed for Chancellor-elect Merz to find the financial resources for much-needed security enforcement. We must act swiftly. Our defense industries need a framework that enables them to deliver, both through cooperation and national initiatives. That means cutting bureaucracy, simplifying the processes, providing real financial access, and bring energy prices down. We cannot have both an over-ambitious green transition and fully capable military. Resources are finite. Europe must decide what it values most.
Thank you very much. Dear colleague Razoulis, I might explain it again. If I keep giving you blue cards now, with every speaker that comes, I cannot give them to other people, and there will be a point where I have to say no blue cards at all anymore. This is why I decided to give every member the opportunity to raise a blue card, but only once, because otherwise we cannot finish in time. We are limited in the end. If you do not agree, then please file a complaint to the President. Thank you. Now it's colleague Gerbrandi.
Thank you, Madam President, Commissioners, Minister. Yes, we can. Nous pouvons, wir schaffen das. After every major geopolitical shock in our young history, we have responded with the courage to share our sovereignties. After 1945, we stopped the cycle of European civil war by merging our resources and our political destinies. And after 1989, we healed a divided nation, created a single citizenship, and proceeded to reunite the continent with parts that were caught behind the Iron Curtain. And now, in 2025, Europeans are asking us to respond to the shock unfolding before our eyes, the rupture of the transatlantic alliance in the face of war on our continent. I believe we know what to do and how to do it. We can support Ukraine in its defense against Russian aggression. To replace the US, the EU would thus have to spend only another 0.12% of its GDP. We can build up a European defense industry, worthy of the world's envy. We already have the technology. Now it's just a matter of investment and long-term contracts. We can jolt our economy into unprecedented growth and build up the euro as an alternative to the dollar as a global reserve currency. It's a matter of breaking down jealously guarded national barriers, investing massively in our universities, issuing common European debt, and opening up trade with all those countries looking for new leadership in the West. And finally, we can build a European army in order to achieve lasting peace. We need a European defense force to secure and defend our continent, enabled by commonly procured European capabilities and led by a European commander. The only thing standing in our way is a giant Orban-shaped elephant in the room, but that too we can fix. We in the Parliament can provide ideas and political pressure. After that, Mr. Costa and Mrs. von der Leyen, the fate of Europe is in your capable hands. And remember, yes, we can.
Dear colleague Gerbrandy, there is a blue card by colleague Jonka. Do you accept that? Just a minute. Yes.
Thank you so much. I will speak in Polish. Okay. Chciałem pana dopytać, ponieważ bardzo...
Just one question. I listened very carefully to what you had to say. What were you thinking when you said that the transatlantic alliance has been broken? Who destroyed the alliance? Who broke those ties? Who is responsible for that breakdown? And another question, once we have gathered the funds needed, do you think that we're going to buy the best tech from the US or not?
Well, for me, it's absolutely clear that Europe not at all wants to tear down the transatlantic alliance. It seems to be a unilateral decision now from the US to at least make it much weaker than it is. If Article 5 is under pressure and it's not a total guarantee, then NATO is not as strong as it should be. It's a deterrence. It's not an aggressive force. And yes, we have to rebuild our European defense industry. That's absolutely clear. We have to be able to build up our own military and not buying it somewhere else.
Dankeschön. Nächste Rednerin ist die Kollegin ReArm.
Thank you very much, colleague ReArm.
Thank you, President. The European Union spends 1.9% of its GDP on defence. It's almost a 2% figure. And what does that mean? Well, I'll give you a couple of examples. Firstly, the European Union spends 3 times more on defence than Russia. And secondly, the European Union and the United Kingdom together spend more than global powers such as China. If Europe was a state, it would be the second biggest military spender in the world. The problem is not how much money is spent, but how it is spent. The problem is that we have 27 different defence systems without effective coordination. We're inefficient, and this is not something we're going to solve by throwing money at it from national budgets, even though that might help to calm down Donald Trump. Commission representatives, we need to analyse how we can be more efficient and how we can coordinate strategy and investment. And we need to work and talk without taboos on how we might finance this with, for example, genuine European taxes, taxes on the most rich and those who pollute most, because otherwise we know that it will be citizens who end up footing the bill. And that is a red line for us. We cannot allow national budgets or the European Union budgets to reduce spending on climate change and on social questions. We agreed on social rights 15 years ago because we needed to. We're not going to do it now for war.
Vale.
Mr. De La Valle.
President, today the entire five-star movement is here in Strasbourg. We bring the voice of the people, which are tired of this endless war, and we want prosperity and welfare. Rearming is a declaration of war. It is an attack on citizens of Europe because healthcare, social services will be sacrificed with this rearming of Europe. We have businesses going bankrupt, families which are paying through the nose. So I think right now we have to work together against this particular approach. It is a terrible mistake, this rearming. And I think every sort of effort has to be made in the direction of peace. Do you want a third world war? A third world war is a possibility, but no money ought to go to defense and to armies. This is not what we want. We want to defend peace. If we go in the other direction, we are killing peace. Madam von der Leyen, once again, I think we have to have a debate with your presence here. And once again, she has simply abandoned this debate, which is ever so key as far as the future of peace in Europe. Peace is what we want.
Come on. Okay, no blue card, however. I might recall that this is, you know, it's probably against the rules. This is a parliament. It comes from parlare. Yes, I know, it's the European flag, and we love it all. So, next speaker, colleague Ulrich.
Madam von der Leyen, you want to buy weapons for 800 billion euros. Please don't hide somewhere in the background. Just show us how you bought vaccines. I'm convinced that if you are the person who does it, then buying weapons will be just another fraud, a fraud on European taxpayers. And who do you think is going to be fighting with those weapons? We're just talking about further militarization, further debts, further consolidation, further inflation. And I'm sorry that the only person who spoke up at the summit against this war planned by von der Leyen was Mr. Orban. Everybody else, Macron, Scholz, Fiala, Fico, they all voted for von der Leyen's plan to amp up military support for Ukraine instead of backing Trump's plan and pushing Zelensky to support peace. When voting, we will not support von der Leyen's plan.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ms. Zacharia.
I see the President of the Commission made her way. Where are you going to get those 800 billion from? How do you have the gall to take that from the pockets of European citizens? You who were sort of handing out those contracts like little candies to the different defense contractors. Now you want to sacrifice all of Europe? Is this by chance? And you're inviting Turkey into this defense structure as well? Turkey occupies half of Cyprus. For this is a casus belli, actually. You say it's a strategic partner, Turkey. Actually, it is an invader, an occupier of European territory. But, of course, Cyprus doesn't have rare earths. Ladies and gentlemen, you have abandoned peace and diplomacy so that the coffers of the defense industry can be filled, so that we can create weapons rather than schools and hospitals. Hospitals actually are falling apart, schools as well. We invite European citizens to go out onto the streets to call for an end to war, yes to peace.
Thank you. Ms. Zovko.
Vielen Dank.
Dear President, dear colleagues, the proposal endorsed by the European Council on the 6th of March is an encouraging sign towards the strengthening of European defence. Good sign in a time of stormy weather. However, the EU's much-needed wake-up should not make us forget that the American umbrella is vital for us. We still need a rainy day friend, now more than ever. The strengthening of our defence must go hand in hand with the strengthening of our relations with our allies, including with the US. Besides the fact that the current EU measures will only produce effects in at least 4 years, we have to bear in mind that the United States and Russia together account for 85% of the world nuclear arsenal. The European Union also strongly needs American intelligence, with some member states even relying entirely on NATO. And the relative autonomy from American intelligence would take years. However, time is running out now. We all know in Ukraine what is going on. For all these reasons, the EU must intensify its diplomatic efforts to find a common grounds with our US ally. The EU defence and strengthening of a pillar of NATO can become robust within some years, but we don't have a time to lose in not engaging in dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ruijten.
Mr. President, colleagues, Council, Commission. Europe is at a critical juncture. You said it yourself, Minister. We are relevant now or never again, to act or to be passive observers to the destruction of the rules-based order. I commend the Member States for their clear understanding that Ukraine and Europe's future require peace through strength. Strength for Ukraine to stand up against Putin and against Trump. The US is forcing Ukraine into an unacceptable surrender it could also achieve without their help. If the circumstances are unfavorable for Ukraine, for Europe, we will not accept it. We have to change these circumstances towards just peace or accept the ugly consequences. Now, President von der Leyen said that the Parliament was right asking for more military support all along. Translate understanding then into real united action now. And for all the member states, President Costa, some a bit more than others, that means sending Ukraine the weapons it needs now. It's irritating, it's appalling even, that there are still warehouses where there's critical air defense that Ukraine needs now. Do what is necessary now for Ukraine, for Europe. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vistisen.
35 billion euros in loans for the Ukraine recovery mechanism, 100 billion in corona loans, 750 billion for the recovery funds, and now the Commission proposed 150 billion for rearmament. But none of this would have been necessary if we had a Commission that was more preoccupied with creating growth instead of bureaucracy. If you had a Commission that was willing to prioritise within their 1.2 trillion euro budget. Ursula von der Leyen, you are making the Europeans into welfare junkies, and you're doing it for borrowed money. So let me put this very simple. We want our money back. Og når vi ser på det fra et dansk perspektiv.
And when we look at it from a Danish angle, you can say that the EU has done very little. Time and again, Denmark has supported Ukraine, military, financial aid, and we've seen how some of the bigger countries, France, Germany, Italy, have not followed our lead. So it's easy to blame Trump for the situation Ukraine is in now. But if you really want to understand why, after 3 years of war, the EU is not able to defend itself and not defend Ukraine, we need to look inward. We have had too little action and much too much talk, and unfortunately that continues.
Thank you. Ms. Kanko.
Madam President, Commissioner, for energy we use to look at Russia. For trade, we depend on China. For defense, we rely on the United States. When we fail, we blame someone else. The truth is that we are weak because we neglected our potential power. Because by not investing enough or soon enough in defense and industry, we gave up the right to be respected. We abandoned our primary duty, which is to provide security and pride to our citizens. They wonder when we will take responsibility. Right now, we are only excited because Trump woke us up. Basically, he just showed us that there is no such thing as a free lunch. And we are upset. The fact that we need this wake-up call about defense is so disturbing for our citizens. We need to remember that Europe was stronger and can be strong again. We need to remember that still the end of the Cold War was not the end of history, that we cannot earn respect if we do not change our mindset. We need to invest in our defense and values and stand firm for our principles, not only when it's comfortable, but also when it is not. Because to the question whether our citizens can count on us, the answer must be yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Cothrim de Figueiredo.
Thank you, Madam President, Sr. Presidente do Conselho, Mr. Commissioners, Senhores Deputados, o mundo mudou muito.
Ladies and gentlemen, the world has changed dramatically since the last plenary. On the 13th of February, the Secretary of State of the United States said that the United States is no longer in a position to guarantee Europe's security. So a period has come to an end, a period of illusion. We have to wake up right now. We have to we tweak the various regulations, the fiscal regulations as well, the financial ones as well, in order to allow for loans and funds to go in the direction of defense. It's very important for us to invest in the defense industry right now. The Council has done things well, but it hasn't done enough. We need a European architecture for defense. Otherwise, we'll have an industrial plan which will be fragmented in nature. We need coordination, and European defense is going to depend on that. And, of course, the nuclear aspect has to be taken on board as well. We need immediate responses, pertinent, consistent responses as well. But there are a number of different risks as well. We have to talk about those risks, actually. The challenge or risk of marginalizing the European Parliament in a systematic fashion. That is there, that risk. The President of the Commission becomes a kind that all of this is, that becomes a kind of decorative figure as well. Next to the people like Macron, Merz, and so on and so forth. So we have to save Europe, and the construct has to play a key role as far as moving forward on this defense structure. We have to defend the institutions, and we have to achieve those levels which will allow us to move forward effectively.
Dear colleague Cothrim de Figueiredo. Hello, João. Hello, João. There is a blue card. Yes, by colleague, do you also guess by whom? Colleague Oliveira, please, if you accept it.
Obrigado, Presidente. Sr. Deputado Coutinho Figueiredo, o Sr. Deputado acha...
Thank you very much, Mr. Cothrim. Now, do you feel that it's very important to have financial regulations which are more flexible in order to provide for defense, but not for pensions, not for health, not for education? It's very important to resolve all of those problems that exist right now, housing, social issues. But for this particular purpose, it is not necessary to change any financial regulations. You want to funnel everything into defense with all the risks that entails and with all the horrific things that go along with it. Can you please explain all of this to me? It seems to me that it's opportunism and nothing less. Well, let's see. The truth is that, yes, security, defense, well, if we don't have that, we're not going to have housing or anything else for our European citizens. We can't continue we can't continue on a passive front as you have done in the past. Thank you.
It pains me to see that we can no longer trust the US or Trump's leadership. I've just returned from Ukraine, where the citizens are fighting for their life, for their peace and their future. We see the Ukrainian citizens can't count on anyone. It's become easier to kill civilians. So that's what the list of dead talks about. In the White House, peace fighter Zelensky was humiliated in front of running cameras. I think that's a shame. I would like to thank Zelensky. Thank you, Zelensky, and thank you to the Ukrainians for standing up to autocrats. Thank you to the Ukrainian soldiers in the battlefield. I would like to say it clearly. Europe needs to be independent from Trump's USA, so we need more in technology, defense, and intelligence. We need an alliance with those countries that still want the international order to be the one that reigns the world. We need to believe in Europe and Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson.
Honourable Chair, as a leftist, I think that Putin and Trump form one of the most dangerous ideological alliances that the world has seen in a long time. Therefore, it is essential that the EU strengthens its support for Ukraine. In addition, the EU should set a strategic goal of reducing our dependencies on the US. This means creating a European security architecture, redirecting all financing currently going to the US arms industry to Europe, reducing energy dependencies, and limiting the powers of the digital oligarchs. Changes to the fiscal rules must enable all of these investments, and I do understand that the goal might also require more investment in European defense. But it would be a historic mistake to finance this by cutting welfare, because that would only cement the rise to power of Putin's and Trump's allies in Europe, the extreme right, and for once the EU needs to be smarter than this.
Dankeschön. Als nächstes spricht der Kollege Stoyanov.
Thank you. Mr. Stoyanov.
Благодаря, госпожо председател. Прахосването на 800...
President, spending 800 billion euros, with 150 billion of that being debts, will lead to an unbearable amount of debt for the member states. We've already seen how difficult things were, the Green Deal, and given the possibility of recession in Europe, we're going to see higher levels of debt, and this will cause huge problems for us. Protecting the European Union is an important decision, but you're taking competences away from sovereign states. We shouldn't exploit procedures to create unbearable debt. We're going through a crisis anyway, and the European Union should cooperate with its neighbours and all global forces to ensure that we have cheaper resources, and thus we can build up strategic partnerships. That will be the best way of ensuring the security in Europe, and the best way of establishing normal relations with Russia. If the US can do it, why can't we?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. When your neighbour's house on fire, you don't haggle over the price of the garden hose. With those words, the US under President Roosevelt came to our aid during the Second World War. 80 years later, war is raging again on the European continent, but this time the US does not only want to negotiate the price of the garden hose, they bully the neighbour into giving up his house altogether before considering any help. This is the situation we are in today, and it's a wake-up call like never before for Europe, a wake-up call that shouldn't have been necessary. For years and years, we have been discussing the need for Europe to get serious about its own defence. Many European leaders have stood here in this room passionately arguing the necessity of this. So it's fair to ask exactly what we have achieved in all these years, and the clear answer is not enough. So in that sense, I really welcome the determination and the ambition shown by President von der Leyen and the European leaders last week. This ambition needs now to be translated into immediate and tangible European action. Extraordinary circumstances ask for extraordinary measures, and we must be brave and bold, not only to be able to help Ukraine, which is of course of crucial importance, but ultimately to help ourselves, because Ukraine's interests are Europe's interests. We are defending common European values. We are defending international law and the rules-based order. We are defending the very basic principle that the aggressor should not be rewarded at the expense of the victim. Today we must defend a future for our children in freedom and safety on our European continent. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. van Bremt.
Collega's,
honourable members, Europe was, is and will always be a peace project. We champion peace and freedom, and that means we need to be in charge of our own freedom. The Commission and Council proposal is a first key step to that end. We need a new European peace architecture, and that must go beyond 27 individual countries investing more. We need our own strategy. We need coordination. We need more than tanks and the like. We need infrastructure. We need to look at technology, and we need to reduce our dependence, our reliance when it comes to energy, resources and medicines. We need further investment in defence, but also sustainability, infrastructure and social policy. Colleagues, our social model is unique around the world. It sets Europe apart from what Putin and Trump champion daily and what the Ukrainians are striving for. We need peace and security, and that's what we need to defend more than ever today. Thank you. Mr. Vanich.
Grazie, Presidente. Thank you very much, President. Thank you, colleagues. Madam von der Leyen, where are you? Mr. Costa, are you here to respond for Madam von der Leyen? Because Madam von der Leyen has fear of this Parliament, because we have Article 822, the defense of Europe. Let's not forget that we're discussing the defense of the people of Europe. And we're speaking now about 800 billion euro. And Russia, the problem isn't in Russia, Budapest or Prague. In Paris, they can't deal with the situation either. The airs, nothing's burning there, but what's burning in Paris are the Christian churches. It's European families which are suffering right now and don't have the money to pay for all of this. That the policies that are being adopted by the Commission are undermining families altogether. We're speaking about autocratic systems, dictatorship, the suspension of democracy. As we saw just a couple of days ago in Romania, what has the Commission done? Absolutely nothing. It's supporting all of this. We're speaking about issues here that are key. We have to file immigration, illegal immigration, criminality, all of these issues that are undermining our societies. And these are the issues that our European citizens see as emergencies, Madam von der Leyen, not the fear of a Russian soldier coming into Western Europe. And let's not forget that it is the representatives of the people of Europe that want to be heard and that want to discuss with you as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weimers.
Madam President, Europe's security isn't built on words. It's guaranteed by firepower. Strong national defenses are key. I believe we can ReArm Europe is a start, but without real output, it's just words. We need bullets, drones, missiles, streaming quickly, unimpeded by delays. Last year, we produced 500 artillery shells. Ukraine burns through that in 2 months. Scaling up, experts say years. We don't have years. Bureaucracy kills. Delays kill. Either we act or we fail. Ukraine needs firepower now. Lines. It's time to turn plans into production, factories into force. Support Ukraine now. Peace through strength now.
Thank you. Mr. Barner.
Doamnă vicepreședinte, domnule...
Thank you. Vice President, Commissioner, President Costa, thank you for joining us this morning. Security in the European Union, unfortunately, is no longer a guarantee, but is up for grabs. It is a battleground. We've seen our vulnerabilities exposed after the entry into force of a new pro-Putin US administration. We can no longer rely on external guarantees for our security. We can no longer afford to hide behind any form of strategic dependency, energy or other forms of dependency. It is time for the European Union to become more autonomous. We need greater investment and we need to do more. We need to go beyond financing. We need united defence, interoperable defence forces that can be deployed rapidly. We need a shared strategic culture, a unified understanding of threats. We must guarantee our own security and be masters of our own destiny. That is the only way we can protect our citizens. Thank you. Mr. Lagodinsky.
Mr. Vice President, Mr. President, our challenges are monumental. Our instruments are outdated. But the idea that unites us all, our Europe, it is not. I believe in the power of Europe because, frankly, what other choice do we have in a world divided between Trumps and Xis and Putins? Ideas inspire, but actions define our future. We need real European capabilities, not grand promises, real European money, not 800 billion of hot air that was promised by the Commission. We need a strategic decision-making center, and we need an opportunity to leave spoilers like Orban behind. We need a decision-making center, not 27 passionate speeches per meeting. A core Europe for defense that should emerge with the big and bold, with committed and capable France and Germany, yes, but also Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania. Let's not forget about those, and London and Oslo. And yes, we make Europe act again. And yes, we will.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is colleague Finjan.
As a member from a country that cherishes our neutrality and recognises the benefits it has brought to the world, I want to express my opposition to any backsliding when it comes to the neutrality of Ireland. Our country has a proud history of UN-mandated peacekeeping missions, a tradition that has gone on for decades. Our neutrality has enabled us to maintain an independent foreign policy, and this is a strength that is valued and supported by the Irish people. It is therefore shameful that our Irish government would try to use this real emergency to end the triple lock policy which is in place to protect our neutrality. The triple lock is a core component of Ireland's independent foreign policy and is enshrined in national declarations to the Irish people by governments in advance of a previous EU referendum. So if the Irish government wants to remove this protection, it should put it to the people and have a referendum on it.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is colleague Montserrat.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, President. The New World Order forces us to see things the way they are. 3 years after the invasion, Putin is not just looking for humiliating capitulation on the part of Zelensky. He wants to attack the values and the peace of the European Union as part of his imperialist dream. It's quite clear what we have to do. We need to show leadership, action, and be resolute. We will not renounce freedom, and we will not rest until we have lasting peace. Our support for Ukraine has been clear and resolute from the beginning. Not everybody could say that here, though. Member states like Poland, Romania are doubling their spending on military spending, and we are only spending 1.2% of our GDP. We are the country that has bought most gas from Putin since the beginning of the war. Sanchez is striking a balance in his coalition, and some of the ideas in the coalition are ones that really need to be looked at clearly. We need to make sure that we devote ourselves to this defence, and we shouldn't make the mistake that Sanchez made with the next generation funds, using them as if they were his own or his party's funds. It's quite clear for us in my party, yes to a union for defence and for proper strategic autonomy. History has shown us the price of not acting decisively. This time we cannot make that mistake.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is colleague Schaldemose.
The world has changed. It's not as safe as it used to be, as it was just a few weeks ago. So the EU needs to change. The EU needs to take responsibility for its own security. We've been far too slow to do that. The Ukraine will be the test of whether we can and want to, but the tendency is quite clear. The further an EU country is geographically placed away from Ukraine, the less they give. We all say that the EU need to act together, but not everything is acting according to that slogan. We need to continue our support for Ukraine, and of course we need to build on our European defence capability, because the war in Ukraine is our test. This is not just about Ukraine, it's about us as well. Let's get started, that we have a European reaction. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Pokorna Yermanova.
Vážení kolegové, Evropa...
Dear colleagues, Europe is in this complicated situation due to its own fault. We have to be unified, pragmatic, but we have to also respect sovereignty of individual state. Defense and security policy cannot be created in Brussels, but it must respond to the needs of members. Direction. We have to strengthen NATO and the alliance, and we have to invest into this project. We have to stop and start to think cool-headedly about our defense policies. Our relations with the US are now being limited only to Ukraine, but there are many other questions where we have to cooperate with the US. We should strive to promote peace and create security guarantees. It would be smart to ensure competitiveness of our economy and to have a good, pragmatic diplomatic policies and transatlantic relations.
Thank you, Mr. Zila.
Cheers. Of course, the decision of the Council on 800 billion is a step in the right direction. However, we should ask, could we, probably 3 years ago, started working on this clause that would allow the member states to invest 650 billion in the military industry? Furthermore, it seems that 150 billion will have a bureaucratic criteria, as we heard today from the chair. And
we would face a similar situation as with the recovery mechanism. What would Europe need to do now? Secure convincing and rapid action. For example, increase sanctions on the Russian shadow fleet to at least the US level. Stop buying liquefied gas from Russia. Seize frozen Russian funds and send to Ukraine military aid that would amount to at least 1% of GDP. Also, the tactics of the EU administration is worrying. However, our best reply would be demonstration of action. Then we would show that the only decisive option is to maintain NATO and to maintain a strong Western position what concerns security. Thank you.
Sehr geehrte Frau Präsidentin.
President, honourable members, it has been said time and again that over the last 3 years we did not do enough by way of response to Russia's aggression, and we only take action when we are forced to under pressure. My party leader, Manfred Raeder, was quite right when he said that we deal with crisis well. We need to help member states do their homework, but can we go further, ensure that we take the next step in Europe? We saw this during the COVID crisis. We had a COVID fund that was huge for Europe to help the member states, but we did not take it further, help Europe to drive forward large-scale projects. Now we have ReArm Europe. It is urgently needed, but we need a common European project. We shouldn't just support member states to go it alone, to rearm and build up defence capabilities. We need common European projects. Mr. Costa, I would call on the Council and Member States, exert pressure to ensure that we have common projects. Manfred Weber talked about a shared satellite surveillance system, defence shields, drone carriers, helicopters and the like. We need a large-scale common project to show the larger world that we have a shared European vision in times of crisis. Thank you. Mr. Zingaretti.
President, I think that Europe ought to increase its security, but the way to do this is to open up some sort of system for a common European defense system. For 27 member states, independently or fragmented, it won't work. Deterrence will be European deterrence, or it's not deterrence at all. We need joint programs to work together concertedly for a European defense industry, for coordination of systems, to invest massively for research and industry in the defense area as well. We have to work together politically, together. Once again, I emphasize that in a concerted fashion in commerce, industry, culture, in order to have a joint and integrated common foreign policy. More federalism is important. And this can be done without siphoning off from the social funds, from the cohesion funds. But once again, it would have to be together. But the absolute Europe will be freer if it is more united, we must remember.
Thank you. Honourable members, look at the European Union's history. Whenever you think they can go no further, we see the next crazy plan. Now we hear that a huge sum of money, 800 billion, will be spent rearming the continent. Calculate the per capita spending. You're looking at about 1,800 per capita. That is costing taxpayers an extra 4,000 to 5,000 per year. Europe needs this money for new, good jobs, for social security, for hospitals, education, schools, but not to rearm. We heard a suggestion from France that we equip the entire continent with nuclear weapons. That is the wrong approach. We need to look at the talks in Saudi Arabia. You can say what you like about Trump, but the administration is trying to get people around the table and build peace. The European Union should step in and act here. It received a Nobel Peace Prize. Now it should cooperate and coordinate across the Western Alliance, put an end to the death, to warfare, ensure that peace negotiations are taken forward, work together on improving prosperity and well-being across the continent, rather than allowing more death and injuries to continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bielan, please.
Thank you, Madam President. For too long, Europe has neglected its defence industry, leaving us dependent on external suppliers and slow to react to crises. While NATO allies uphold Article 5, they have failed to meet Article 3's obligation to develop their own defence capabilities. EU member states must urgently invest in their own security, as Poland did under Law and Justice leadership. Recent events have shown that without the United States, Europe is unfortunately nearly defenceless. Regardless of political turbulence or disagreements, we must maintain strong and reliable transatlantic relations. Our security depends on it. And here from this very place, I once again urge the Prime Minister of Poland to stop blocking President Duda's proposal to convene an EU-US summit in Warsaw under Polish presidency. Failing to hold it will only deepen the cracks in our relations with our most important ally. We cannot afford such missteps at a time when security challenges are multiplying across Europe and beyond. Thank you.
Dankeschön. Nächster Redner ist der Kollege
Colleague Tar is our next speaker.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues, usually I speak Hungarian, but I'm compelled to speak English because I need to speak to the people of Europe on behalf of my fellow Hungarians. In an increasingly uncertain global political situation, we need a strong Europe, which requires the establishment of a new security system. Unfortunately, there is a risk that my country, Hungary, will not be part of this because the current Hungarian Prime Minister serves foreign interests. The country's economy is in despair, inflation is soaring, and corruption eats our present and our future. The government is isolating Hungary. It claims to seek peace, but in reality it endangers the security of Hungarians and that of the whole of Europe. The vast majority of Hungarians believe that Hungary's place is in Europe. Everyone must clearly understand that. Hungary's home is Europe, and Europe's security is equal to Hungary's security. We, the opposition, our TISA party, are ready to lead Hungary back to the heart of Europe. Our future lies in a strong, secure, and prosperous Europe, not in the shadows of the Kremlin. Thank you.
Dear colleague, there is a blue card by Mr. Jungblut. Do you accept that? Please go ahead. 613.
Sehr geehrter Kollege, Sie haben ja...
Colleague, you used the speaking time to speak about your particular region, and you spoke about European integration. Now, your delegation has said that Hungary is in the heart of Europe. What is it that actually you want to achieve? Do you want armies to be sacrificed? Do you want a European army that will defend or won't defend Hungary? Do you want to say that your friends in the CDU are that they're going to move forward to defend Hungary, to sacrifice themselves, or to sacrifice themselves for Europe? So tell us exactly what is it that you want, what do you mean by the heart of Europe?
2 seconds for the answer, please.
Azt értem az Európa szíve alatt, hogy egy olyan Európában...
Yeah, by the heart of Europe, what I wanted to say is that we're living in a Europe whose countries will work together on a voluntary basis, cooperate, in other words, for a secure Europe, a Europe that offers security to its citizens. Europeans have to work together to help each other, and that was the idea behind the heart of Europe.
Gracias, President.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, President, on behalf of the Spanish Socialist delegation, I would like to honour the families and relatives of the attacks on the 11th of March. We have seen warfare in recent years, and young people, our society in general, is worried. We need to change to adapt to the new geopolitical situation. We cannot leave this in the hands of the far right. They will continue to destroy what makes the European Union unique. We need to decide, and they need to decide, are they with Europe and Ukraine or with Putin? We need to continue to support Ukraine, ensure a lasting, just peace for Ukrainians and Europeans. And in the medium term, we need to rearm Europe, move towards a common defence policy so we are autonomous and can guarantee our own security. Thank you.
Colleague, there are blue cards. Javier, colleague Moreno Sanchez. There are blue cards from colleague Madison, ECR. Please go ahead. 30 seconds for the question. If there's a red light, 209, please, microphone. I think you have to press, nevertheless.
So, voila. So anyway, thanks so much. I generally agree with you when we are talking about the defense policies, we really have to support more Ukraine. I definitely agree. But as you are from the Socialist Party from Spain, just a very small, tiny question. What is your opinion why Spain has provided so little help to Ukraine currently? Because when you look on the GDP, the real help, military aid, what has given to Ukraine, it's almost nothing compared to Poland, Estonia, Denmark, Finland, and so on. So why there are so much talk and no actions? So what is the problem in Spain with the socialists? Why you're not acting?
30 seconds for the answer.
Thank you for your question. From the very start of Putin's invasion of Ukraine, Spain has stood firmly with Ukraine. We have done everything we could to achieve a just and lasting peace. We stand with Ukraine and we will continue to support Ukraine regardless of what is needed. The Spanish government stands firmly with Ukraine and will continue to support Ukraine. It's not just about peace in Ukraine, but peace throughout Europe, defence of our democratic values. We must stand united, remain united. Let me say to the European far right, you have to decide whether you're with Putin or with us.
Thank you. Our next speaker is colleague Maréchal.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, President. Woe to the vanquished and the vassals. That is the lesson being driven into the Europeans for some weeks now. If we don't want to see one of our heads of state in the same position as Vladimir Zelensky in the Oval Office, well, yes, then we do need to increase our soldiers and our ammunition and so on. Not to play at escalation games, but to be feared and respected because we are able to defend ourselves. And for that, we need to dispense now with the illusion of an armed force at the service of a federal Europe. The European Union should facilitate financing for this rearmament, but it can't be the commander-in-chief. It's national armies who will defend our nations. It is, of course, urgent that we have a bi-European policy when it comes to military spending. And if that's not the cornerstone of the new architecture to defend our continent, then all attempts at independence will be an illusion. But we shouldn't fool ourselves. Military rearming will only work if we have rearming based on our demographics and our identities. And it's time that this institution began to deal with that.
Our next speaker is colleague Bugalho.
Madam President, Sr. Presidente, há 3 anos ninguém antecipou que a Europa se unisse.
3 years ago, nobody could have imagined or anticipated these events, that there would be a war in Ukraine. There are some that say right now that Europe doesn't really count. In the last 100 days, the institutions have shown that Europe indeed exists. We have responded defending our economies against the tariff threats that are out there. And as far as support for Ukraine, we have responded very, very quickly. The European Union has shown that we can react without provoking at the same time. What we don't want are new invasions, further incursions. What we would like is for us to put an end to the horrific poverty that in the end culminates in war.
Is our security. I say to my Romanian friends, I know, is our democracy. I say to my Baltic friends, your defense cannot just be our defense. To our Ukrainian friends, I say, your freedom is our freedom. Today is increasingly clear that a common response is the only fair response, that to invest in defense is the most urgent response in solidarity. Let's not waste time, let's do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is colleague Repassi.
Frau Präsidentin, liebe
President, honourable members, we saw a circus in the White House about 10 days ago, and now we know that the EU does not have a reliable ally on the other side of the Atlantic. We must face the harsh truth. We alone are responsible for our own security. That means we need to make a real change, not just lip service. 650 billion in additional national debt will not lead to the 800 billion that we need to generate by way of investment in defence. We need defence to be a European competence. We need genuinely European funds for defence without undermining social security. We need a common debt for a common defence spending and no increase in national debt levels. Let's be daring. This is the pandemic of our time.
Thank
you very much. Our next speaker is Mr. Galler. President, colleagues, the aggressor in the Kremlin doesn't know what they're up against in. The situation in Ukraine is what it is, and I think it's quite clear that there is doubt whether the United States will offer its particular responsibility, in other words, of protecting. So we have to take into consideration this worst-case scenario. We have to activate our entire defense sector at the national and at the European level as well. The proposal, in other words, of the Commission. We have problems with the legal basis of this, and we would hope that the national escape clauses will be left there as something which will allow for a joint project in order to offer interoperability in that concerted effort. We need a European Sky Shield, as an example, and other similar such concerted efforts. We see how the European military machinery is moving forward and producing more than it can even implement in the Ukraine for the time being. The Russian attack or threat is against us, and Ukraine is on the front line. We have to do whatever we can to defend it as well. And the Ukrainians are the first that want peace. They don't want war, but they also know what a Russian Stalinist peace would look like. That threats us as well. It would threat us if Ukraine were to fall. Let us not go that far. Slava Ukraine.
Vom Kollegen Kaliniak. Bitte schön, please. 849, microphone, oben rechts.
Ďakujem pekne. Thank you. I will wait for the colleague. Je hrozné, že v čase... It's terrible that at a time when the whole world is pushing for diplomacy and for peace negotiations, we've been talking about rearming Europe and military federalization. I think this is completely wrong, but here's my question for you. We're talking about hundreds of billions for rearming as a way of supporting Ukraine as well, but Ukraine is starting to lack not money, not arms, not weapons, but people. How do you want to solve this problem? You want to deport Ukrainians from EU territory, or do you want to send European soldiers there? Thank you.
We will do everything we will support whatever necessary for a just peace, and the earlier the better. And that means that when we've come to an end with this war, we will offer whatever we can so that Ukraine will not be attacked once again. And we need this deterrent there. Ukraine requires security guarantees. It deserves that. And the British Prime Minister said, boots on the ground and planes in the air. And I do think until the end of the war and afterwards, that would be a proper response to this Russian threat which is out there. Thank you. Mr. Glucksmann.
Monsieur le Président.
President, my dear colleagues, the great writer Roman Gary asked why the French elite had not followed General de Gaulle to London in 1940. Was it because they were anti-Semitic? No. Were they pro-Nazis? No. The reason was sadly banal, according to Gary. It's that they liked their furniture too much. Big storms means that you need to shift things. It's time that we jettison some of our ideas. We are being under the threat of Russia and what's happened by the United States. It's now up to us to help our first line of defence, which is the Ukrainian resistance. The European Council has affirmed this, but that involves taking decisions, and our member states do not want to step up to the plate. This is to do with, for example, how we finance things and the frozen assets that exist. We need to do what we can to build up an autonomous defence system, but we need to go further than what was announced on Thursday. Not just common financing through European programmes, but we need to make sure that we can develop European industries rather than piling up F-35s. We need more and more European, a more European approach. Long live Ukraine.
Thank you very much. Mr. Niedermayer is next.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The world has changed, not to better in the last few years, but mostly in the last few weeks. I guess it's clear what we Europeans have to do. And this is exact opposite to what Moscow, Beijing, but also Donald Trump is dreaming about. We must get united and we must get much, much, much stronger. From that point of view, the summit was the good start. But not everything is about the money. We need a strong and clear foreign policy to be able to represent interests of Europeans. Common purchases are good, but it's not the same as European defense that we desperately need, and this is what Manfred Weber was talking about. So for me, the summit was the good start, but we must go much, much farther, and we must go much, much quicker, because there is very small time left. Thank you.
There is a blue card by colleague Dostal. Would you accept that?
Yep.
Okay. 843, microphone, please.
Good morning, Mr. Niedermayer. I hope you will respond to my question. Do you really think it would be a good idea to transfer deciding about war and peace from Prague or other capitals of sovereign nations to Brussels and let Brussels institutions decide if our sons will go to war? Because this is a necessary aspect of common European defence you propose. Thank you very much.
First, this is not exactly what I was talking about, but I guess it's obvious, absolutely obvious, or we defend ourselves together or we don't defend ourselves. What I'm talking about are the projects that will substantially increase our ability to defend and make it much more effective and save the money. For example, anti-missile defense, the drone defense, the electronic defense, and so on. This would make, and I guess you understand, much more effective to make it together than try to develop at the same time 10 or 20 different systems. We don't need to invent the wheels, each of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Nika.
Thank you very much, Madam President.
Šefčovič, discutăm astăzi despre un program de asigurare de fapt a securității Uniunii Europene. Pentru mine, ca român și pentru țara mea, este extrem de important.
Well, I think security is extremely important. We need to know that we are not just on the sidelines. We need to be very clear about what we're doing and who we're doing it with. We need to be able to tell Romanians that there is no danger to their way of life. If we look at the current geopolitical situation, it's clear that you only be respected if you have the means to defend yourself. We need to learn that lesson. We need to have air defenses. We need to have drones. We need to have satellite systems to defend ourselves. Only then will we be able to continue our lives in the same way. We need to have the industry. We need to have steel. We need to have aluminium. Otherwise, we will not be successful in defending our strategic interests. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Juknovic-Jene, please.
Colleagues, it was exactly 35 years ago that as a member of the first freely elected Lithuanian parliament, I voted for Lithuania's independence. And today's debate, for me, is a step in the same direction, but this time together with Europe. My message today is very clear. Europe will be strong if we help Ukraine win. And we can do it, but we just need to believe it. ReArm Europe must be implemented in solidarity amongst EU member states and in solidarity with Ukraine, which is already a de facto member of the European Union, because it is defending us with its blood. Europe's destiny is being decided on the Ukrainian front. Someone has calculated that so far the European military support for Ukraine has not cost each EU citizen more than 2 cups of coffee. And EU member states certainly can give more to Ukraine. Let's agree to give to Ukraine to no less than 0.25% of GDP each. Let's learn from history and let's face up to the challenge. And let's remember Winston Churchill's words.
Thank you. Mr. Miro, please.
Obrigada, Presidente. Caro Presidente do Conselho. Quero começar...
President of the Council, thank you for the conclusions of last week's Extraordinary European Council last week. More than ever, we all understand that European security is closely linked to the war in Ukraine. Rearmament of the European Union, and in particular responding to hybrid threats, is not a choice. It is a deterrent. Ukraine needs support. We need to mobilise frozen Russian assets. The Council conclusions do reflect what we need, but we need to go further. I think just as we did with the pandemic. With security and defence, we also need more solidarity and coordination among member states, in particular through the pooling of debt and joint purchases. We need to do this to continue to be ambitious in the social and environmental sphere in the EU. This, after all, is our raison d'etre. And we must be clear with our citizens. The times are serious, and we hope for a just peace. A just peace in Ukraine is something that could protect us and enable us to continue as free democratic societies. Mr. Piccolo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dear colleagues, I welcome the proposal to strengthen European Union defence capabilities with ReArm Europe, and I call on Member States to proceed forward. I also believe that this House will support an even more ambitious position. It goes without saying that transatlantic disruption caused by the new US administration has brought us long-term geopolitical changes. We must not base European security on voter attitudes in US swing states. The EU needs to plan de-risking policy towards Trump's Washington. This is not America that wants its allies to respect it. This is an America that wants its allies to fear it. Europe must make some historical and responsible steps ahead. Bold leadership and adequate funds are needed, including through seizing 200 billion euros of Russian assets. I always repeat that our security does not stop at our borders. That's why we have to act fast and to act now. Time is of essence. Thank you.
Ganz herzlichen Dank, auch für Ihre zeitliche.
Thank you, and thank you for sticking to the time. That means that we can now take 9 colleagues under the Catch the Eye procedure. And I do apologise to the relatively few people that we couldn't take on board because we really are limited at the end of our debate today in terms of time. But we'll begin with Mr. Jonsky, and Ms. Rapini can also prepare.
Bitte Mikrofon 494.
Microphone, please.
Bardzo dziękuję.
Thank you so much. Security of Europe is not just a slogan, words of Polish presidency. It's also a challenge for the whole of Europe. And I will say very clearly, we have to get armed because Putin does not want to stop in Donbas. He does not want to stop in Ukraine. And it is not true when he's saying now that he does not want people to die. Because if it was so, he wouldn't have attacked Ukraine 3 years ago. I know that here there are still people who would like to do business with Putin. Luckily, there are fewer and fewer of them. But there are people who still speak whatever the Russian propaganda says, Russia Today, for example. But we have to say it's enough. We have to build European insurance system. And to do this, we have to invest huge amounts in arming ourselves. And the European Commission's plan to spend up to 800 billion is a good idea, but it must be done fast, without long debates, long consultations and discussions. We have to do it now, because we are out of time. And I want to say one more thing. Poland wants to use almost 30 billion zloty in order to invest in defense, because security is the most important thing. Thank you.
Please also keep you in this last part of the debate. Das Wort hat nun die Kollegin
Ms. Grappini has the floor now, and Mr. Ghiari can prepare.
Al Consiliului European, President of the European Council, Commissioner, dear colleagues, today we were supposed to debate about the Council meeting on the 20th of March. Unfortunately, almost all speeches had to do with rearming, defense. These are very important topics, but I'd like to stick to the 3 points that the presidency listed, and I'd like you to discuss these, President, on March 20th. I'm talking about the economic issue. We cannot be strong, as you said, Minister, without this. There are 3 very important pillars: simplification, energy, and investments. If these 3 things are not done, there is no way we can defend ourselves. And unfortunately, I have to say that in the past 20 years, the diplomacy in the EU has backtracked. If you want to be strong at a global level, you have to be able to negotiate with the stronger states and the weaker states, and you have to have a solid solid economy that will then allow you to sit at the negotiation table. So, President Costa, especially for you, I'd like to ask you to discuss on March 20th what our solutions are for energy, because the SMEs are down, the population cannot afford energy in my country and other Eastern countries. Thank you.
Apparently there was not translation in every language, but at least in German I had it. Jetzt kommt der Kollege Gehr.
Ms. Geardi and then Ms. Ford.
Madam Chair, you rightly said that we must build a common defence. We heard a lot of things about Ukraine, but not one word about Cyprus. The security problem of Europe is not just Russia, it is also Turkey. In a European corner, Cyprus, one of the 27 member states, if you still remember, is under illegal occupation. There can be no occupation forces on Cyprus territory. The presence of Turkey in London was an insult. We cannot rely on Turkey illegally occupying the northern part of Cyprus, a country, Turkey, that is threatening other EU member states. Turkey not only does not have a position in the EU, it doesn't have a position in the European defence. Freedom to...
Thank you. Ms. Woutmans, en dan meneer Paspa.
Costa, ik ga mij rechtstreeks tot u richten. Mevrouw Ursula.
Mrs. von der Leyen has actually made sure that we have 800 billion more to spend, and everybody agreed, and everybody went home. But I'm turning to you, sir, because now we start to do a tougher job. We're going to have to do things differently. I hope you'll set up a coalition of the buying. Please buy together. We know what we need to buy. We need to air defence, European nuclear umbrella, and Merz and Macron. I listened to both of them, and if you put that forward, France and Germany are going to join in. And if France and Germany join in, then everybody else will join in too. So please do this and take the Norwegians, take the Brits, make them sit around the table. And it's not... We want a coalition of the willing and one huge step which you need to take together with the Commission. It's only been said a few times this morning, but it's crucial. Take the courageous step towards a European army. That is what we need. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Malath has the floor, and Demeric can prepare.
Presidenta von der Leyen, delante de la escalada militarista y belicista.
President von der Leyen, let me say, as a European MEP from a pacifist party, that we are against this European re-environment. It doesn't seem to matter that the cost of war will be paid by the people, by the citizens. It's going to be at the cost of social policy. You prefer to support more rearmament and less social options such as housing or health. We need to defend peace again. We need to resolve conflicts peacefully. We need to promote diplomacy. We need to focus on human rights. We need to come back to democracy, not simply rearmament and escalation of conflict, not in our name. Thank you.
Thank you. Demirel can speak next, and then Zipa.
Dankeschön, Frau Präsident.
Thank you, President. Ms. von der Leyen said that the time of illusions is past, and yet at the same time she strewed so much sand in people's eyes that it's very difficult to see. She's using people's feelings of insecurity to promote a huge rearmament package, 800 billion euros, not for education or jobs or social justice, but for weapons. This is not going to lead to more security and peace here in Europe. No. It doesn't meet our needs. It's about the competition between major powers. And since 2020 in this Parliament, von der Leyen has always spoken of that. Colleagues, to those of you who are here quoting people and saying that you want to rearm for war, I would say you can go to the front if you want, but don't call on our own sons and daughters to go to the front. Colleagues, the people of Europe are not longing for war, they are longing for peace. Our history in Europe has taught us that more weapons do not contribute to peace. Thank you. Ms. Sieber and then Mr. Schuster.
Liebe Menschen Europas, unsere...
Dear colleagues, maybe Mrs. von der Leyen doesn't know this, but, when she was Minister of Defense in Germany, I was working in one of the army sections and departments of Germany in the tanks. And the European Union is a peace project, but as long as the UN is a toothless tiger, well, we need a European army, because the Spaniards and the Portuguese are not going to be attacked, and certainly not the people from Luxembourg will be suffering this. But if you look at Article 42.7, Treaty of the European Union, Article 5 of NATO, they need to be put on an equal footing. But we need to fight for our peace, and this peace is being fought for in Ukraine, and we need to look at our priorities. We need to make sure that we can move towards rearmament. Now, exactly as our exercise in the East, which I carried out when I was in the army. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sousa Silva and then Mr. Bayar.
Senhora Presidente, Senhor Presidente do Conselho.
Thank you very much, Council President, Madam Commissioner. The conclusions of the extraordinary Council meeting acknowledge the existence of a European strategy. For years, we've had a feeble and contradictory strategy. We need a Europe that is relevant on the geostrategic scene, but we don't have the strength to influence our neighbours, and now we need to catch up on those shortfalls. Security means that we have all of the public policies at our disposal, but a time of war is not a time for Brussels bureaucracy. While Europe is deliberating, the front lines are moving, our industrial capacities are changing, and vulnerabilities are increasing. With the ReArm Europe plan, a window of opportunity is opening for Europe, and now is the time for change. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bayan.
Grazie.
Thank you. Do we want peace or do we want to extend the war? As a socialist and coming from a country that is neutral, I am very worried that we keep focusing on the war and on the war economy. Instead of focusing on products, on capital, on people, we are changing into a war economy that divides and not joins people together. Of course, there is a threat to the European Union, especially nowadays because of the uncertainty that are coming from the other side of the Atlantic. But I do understand that we have to have joint efforts on defense, but it does make sense. However, we cannot put other ambitions aside. At the same time, we need to ensure that we invest in people's lives. We have to base our economy on well-being and not the war, on peace and not on destruction. Thank you.
Thank you. And once again, I do apologise to those colleagues who were not able to take the floor, but we do need to allow time for our three closing speakers, starting on behalf of the Commission with Mr. Šefčovič, Vice President.
Thank you, Madam President, Mr. President of the European Council, Honourable Minister, my dear colleague, Commissioner Koch, honourable members of the European Parliament. First and foremost, I really would like to thank you for all the interventions and debate which for sure will enter into history as a debate, as a plenary, where we made a decisive step towards building common European defence. Spirit of the consensus from the European Council, as unprecedented and as unthinkable just a few weeks ago, was felt, I would say, in most of the debate very strongly here as well in this House of European democracy. And as many of you said, we have to think differently. Only in that way we can mobilise Europe's massive resources and start the deterrence build-up we need. Many of you, honourable members, have been absolutely right to underscore that we cannot benefit from peace dividend anymore. But to the contrary, we must address running security deficit. It's a huge task. And I would say that we must work on all levels, European, national. We have to bring together our industry, our economic stakeholders. And as you heard from the President von der Leyen, first ever Commissioner for Defence, Mr. Kubilius, who also joined our debate this morning, together with the whole College of Commissioners, will be working day and night to achieve these goals. We all realise that powerful Europe means just and lasting peace in Ukraine. And free and sovereign Ukraine means stronger Europe. My colleague, Commissioner Kos, here with us today, has moved cooperation with Ukraine to the new level. She works tirelessly to support Ukraine in their path towards European membership. And I agree with her that we have to underline that we are living in historic times, and therefore extraordinary challenges require extraordinary answers. As we discussed the last time in this plenary, new geopolitics and transactional fragmentation of the world means that the size matters again. Therefore, enlargement of European family, enlargement of democracy, enlargement of respect for our values are the best answers for today's unstable world, and the Commission will work hard to achieve these goals. Let me conclude by the words of Mr. Glucksmann, who said, c'est l'heure de la vérité pour l'Europe. Et je suis tout à fait d'accord.
It's time of truth for Europe, and I agree entirely with him. Thank you.
Herzlichen Dank für den Rat.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the Council, Mr. Schlapka.
Madam Chair, President Costa, honourable commissioners, honourable members. Thank you very much for your remarks and comments. It's clear for everyone that we are at a crucial juncture. The Special European Council last week marked an important progress, but we are aware that we have crucial work ahead of us, and an important part of that work must be carried out by the Council. The Council is ready to do its job and follow up on the Special European Council conclusions with the urgency that the moment requires, namely in the setting up of the necessary instruments to bolster the security and the European Union and the ramping up of the European defence technological and industrial base. Let me address the call of some MEPs on frozen assets. There will be a debate on it tomorrow. Last year, G7 leaders agreed to use the revenues from the immobilisation of Russian assets in the EU for repaying loans to Ukraine granted by the EU and G7 for the amount of $50 billion. The Council will consider all possible solutions in coordination with our international partners. Thank you very much for this debate, and thank you very much for your attention.
Ganz herzlichen Dank.
Thank you very much. And now on behalf of the European Council, Mr. Costa.
Madam President, honourable members of the European Commission, Minister Schwabka, members of the European Parliament. Thanks for this opportunity for this democratic dialogue, and allow me to give 5 short remarks. First, Peace without defence is an illusion, and we need to invest more, better and faster in our own defence. It is what we are doing, and we need to do more, to invest more, to invest together, to develop common projects for sure. But last week we have done a decisive step, but not the last one. We need to continue, and we will continue. Second, defence is broader than ReArm. We need to invest in our strategic autonomy, to reducing our dependencies on energy, to secure supply chains, to fight disinformation and protect the integrity of our democratic process, and to keep under control our borders. Third remark, European Union and the Member States don't need to choose to invest in peace or to invest in health systems, education or housing. ReArm and the escape clause provide additional funds to defence, strengthen our societies, protect our citizens, boost our economies is essential to strengthen our defence. Fourth, this war is not only about Ukraine. In fact, this war is about international law, a rules-based international order, and to protect the universal values enshrined in the United Nations Charter: sovereignty, territorial integrity, self-determination, respect of internationally recognized borders. This is essential in Ukraine, as is essential in the Republic Democratic of Congo, in the Kingdom of Denmark, or in Cyprus. Then we need to stand for the international law, because international law must win this war. And a last remark, we need to invest more in diplomacy. We need to engage with partners around the world and weaken a global network, of course, with our transatlantic partners and beyond, by enlargement, by trade, and stand for a multilateral system, and champion global causes like climate change, fight poverty, or engage to develop the Pact for the Future. These five remarks synthesize what we need to continue to do to ensure our security and to contribute to support Ukraine for a comprehensive, just and lasting peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this interesting debate and for the time discipline. It's really remarkable. We are perfectly on time, so I suspend for a very short moment until all the colleagues have arrived, and then we will continue.